Good morning, everyone, or good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Qing Gao. I'm the director of the China Center for Social Policy at the Columbia School of Social Work. I'm excited and very happy to co-host this lecture series with Weatherhead East Asian Institute at Columbia University. So today we have the first lecture in this year's lecture series, titled The Chinese Social Welfare Policy from Comparative Perspectives. Today's topic cannot be more timely. It's focusing on gender discrimination in the workplace, China from a global comparative perspective. I believe many of you, like me, were watching the US presidential debate last night. The lack of gender diversity and the gendered behaviors that's shown in the debate was very troubling, and I felt sad my children, young children, had to witness that. So today it's my honor and great pleasure to have my colleague and friend, Professor Rong Zhao from CUNY Hunter College to join us, who is an expert on this topic. Professor Zhao received her PhD from my school, Columbia School of Social Work. She is a leading expert on gender inequality in the workplace and human service workforce and the intersection of the two. She's also a great mentor, great colleague, great friend to many of us. She is a tireless advocate for gender equality in the workplace and at home. So I turn it over to you, Professor Zhao, and look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gao, for the kind introduction, and thanks to the China Center for Social Policy for this opportunity to speak about a topic that is close to my heart. I also want to thank the Weatherhead East Asian Institute for co-sponsoring this event. Last but not the least, I warmly thank everyone in the audience to make the time for the event, and I look forward to exchanging with you at the end of this talk.
Zhao, let me just add one thing I forgot. We will do the lecture first. If you have any questions, whoever in the audience, please type the questions in the Q&A box, and we will make sure to come to you. You can also feel free to chat with each other in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you. So in addition to Dr. Gao's introduction of my professional life, I'd like to add some information on the personal side of me. So I was born and raised in rural China, a place with prevalent son preference, meaning that almost every family prefers sons to daughters, and they aborted millions of girls in order to have boys. And then I went through the authoritative and patriarchal educational system, which taught girls on a daily basis, both on the textbooks and by teachers, that they were less intelligent than boys, and what mattered most for a woman is family and her relationship with a man. And now I am a single mother with a 4-year-old child, currently experiencing motherhood penalty in my career, especially during this pandemic. Therefore, I'd like to make a request that please try not to only understand this issue in an abstract way. Please be reminded that behind the numbers and the statistics of gender discrimination that I'm going to show you are millions of women who only have this one life like anyone else. And they want to live a life with dignity, freedom, and independence as much as men do. They're my family and friends. They're your family and friends. And they're someone's beloved daughters, mothers, sisters, and partners. So imagine when there's structural discrimination against them in the workplace, how would it impact their lives, both personally and professionally? So without further ado, let's begin. To begin with, you're going to see in this talk that the level of gender discrimination in China is pretty bad. And things here in the US indeed are better in general. Nevertheless, I don't want you to think that I'm treating the US as a role model, because it is not. To date, this country has not had one single female president. And look at who are the people in power making decisions that determine the lives of half of the population. There's literally only one woman in this White House meeting. Back to China. Let's first look at some statistics on gender inequality in the workplace. This graph presents the labor force participation rates of urban women and men from 1995 to 2013. There's a clear pattern that overall, female labor force participation rate has been decreasing and the gender gap has been widening. In 2013, women's labor market participation rate was about 20% less than men. Here's the gender pay gap. As you can see, the gender pay gap has been widening since 1995. In 2013, on average, women's earning was 74% of men's. After controlling qualifications and other pay determinants, a woman made about 80 cents when a comparable man made $1. In terms of gender distribution across industries, you can see here that most industries are dominated by men. There are only 5 industries with 50 or higher female representation. They're health services, education, hotels, finance, and wholesale. Women only represent about 10% of the top government officials and policymakers. In the Chinese Academy of Sciences, there are only about 6% of women scientists. And in the Chinese Academy of Engineering, there are only about 5% are women. In the legal system, about 10% of the attorney generals are women, and 15% of the associate attorney generals are women. According to this data, Chinese women spend about 3.8 hours a day on unpaid work, including grocery shopping, childcare, and laundry. That is more than double the amount of time men spend. The World Economic Forum does an annual gender equality ranking. In 2006, China ranked 63 out of the 115 countries participating in the ranking. And in 2020, it ranked 106 out of 153 countries. So there has been a regression in gender equality in the Chinese society. In case you're interested, here is the countries ranked high in gender equality. By the way, the US ranked 53 out of 153 countries. I just gave you many numbers showing how unequal the workplace is in China. Now let's visualize what it's like to be a woman or man in the workplace. You can see that there's not one single woman in the institution that holds the highest power in China. This is a photo of a group of coders in a tech company. They're paid well and the occupation has high status. However, their employers are concerned that they could be too stressed working in an all-male environment. Therefore, this is what they do. They hire attractive women to ease this man's stresses by providing massage and chatting with them. Note that women like Shen Yue in this photo are also college educated, and this is what they do, and this is what the men do. Another example is chef. It is literally an all-male profession in China. It is a relatively high-paying profession for people with lower levels of education. This is puzzling, right? Because we're told that women are better at housework, including cooking. But why aren't they employed as professional chefs? When hiring men as chefs, they said that men are better at cooking, but why don't they cook at home? This is child daycare workers and preschool teachers. As you can see, there's literally no man in this low-paying profession. Lastly, these are domestic workers, all female as well. It has been pretty clear that there is severe occupational segregation along the gender line in the Chinese society. But how does this happen? This example of job posting for highly sought after government official jobs provides a partial answer to the question. As you can see here, the majority of positions specify that they only want men. Very few are open to women. And in particular, for those who have the highest number of openings, they're all reserved for men. Before I show you the cases in which women and men are segregated into different places, but how about when they do work together in the same place? I find this photo speaks well to the reality. This is the 2 sessions. where the government officials and lawmakers meet to make big decisions for the country. You can see here, people who sit are mostly men, and there are a group of young and good-looking women serving them. I ask you to think about your own workplace. Think about schools, government agencies, hospitals, companies, and NGOs. In these places, who are the managers and who are the staff? Who are the people working? Who are the people in power and who are the people working at the bottom of the organizations? Is the power and status distributed majorly along the gender line? I believe the answer is yes, both in China and in the US. In addition to the occupational segregation and that women work at the lower level of organizations, the other issue is that women's bodies are overtly sexualized in the workplace. Look at the flight attendants in China and North Korea. Why are they all young-aged, good-looking, having long legs, and wearing high heels? Would this be a result of equal employment opportunity for everyone? And where would these young women be when they get older? This job posting explains why the flight attendants are all like that in China. It explicitly says that the candidate has to be born after 1990, which means that most of us aren't even qualified. And then the candidate can't be married. They have to have favorable facial features, well-proportioned figure, and meet a certain standard for height, which is a very high standard. Here is a standard resume that every Chinese college graduate has to prepare before getting on the job market. The norm is present a photo that shows your facial features and provide information on your gender, race and ethnicity, height, date of birth, marital status, and if you're a member of the Chinese Communist Party or not. Therefore, is it any wonder that a significant percentage of women are out of labor force? They're excluded from the high-paying and high-status jobs, and they are paid less than men when do the same work. An even more worrisome problem is that both the employers and the job seekers don't recognize this as gender discrimination. Even the women themselves accept this kind of discrimination as legitimate. The argument is that employers have the right to hire whoever they think are more productive or desirable workers. For example, this article argued that only hiring good-looking women and excluding applicants with graduate degrees for flight attendants is not discrimination. And the article is published in a state-owned newspaper in China. Yes, in China, a lot of media are state-owned. And yes, as you can imagine, the author is a male. I know this is pretty shocking for non-Chinese audience. So I'll explain why there's a lack of awareness of gender discrimination in the Chinese society. The first issue is that people don't know that they have a right to work. There's a lack of human right awareness. And when you even don't know that you have a right, you accept the inhuman ways that you're treated. Even though there's a law that prohibits gender discrimination, it is rarely enforced, and filing a lawsuit against the employer usually doesn't serve you good. You will be seen as a troublemaker, and you might be harassed by the police. So basically, the law is only on paper. In addition, the law itself also discriminates against women. For example, in the name of protecting women, this article of the labor law states that women are not allowed to work for jobs that require intensive physical labor, such as forest, logging, mining, and certain construction jobs. Second, there's not a common ground among Chinese people that employers do not enjoy unconstrained autonomy in hiring. Employers cannot discriminate against job seekers based on gender, and same as that people with higher income should pay higher taxes. The bigger the employer, the bigger obligation they have to ensure a non-discriminatory workplace, especially for firms that receive government funding, or to say that they are funded by tax dollars. Lastly, there's a lack of understanding about what kind of employer behaviors are considered as discrimination. To clarify, Gender discrimination is the unequal or disadvantaged treatment of an individual or group of individuals solely based on gender. For example, a female worker equally qualified for a job as men do, but the employer refuses to hire her simply because she's a woman. Next, I'd like to briefly address the gender-based norms and biases that have been used to justify the discriminations. The major one is the notion that women and men are fundamentally different, and they have different attributes, different social roles, and they are a set of behaviors that are only appropriate for women or for men. This notion is socially constructed and have been proved untrue, but unfortunately, it is still very influential in today's society. I'm going to give you some examples. The first one is that women are not intellectual, and therefore, educational institutions excluded women for a long time in the history. You may not know that Columbia College only started to admit women in 1983, and Yale did not open its door to the first female undergraduates until 1969. Today, about half of Columbia's students are female. People also used to think that women can't be doctors. Therefore, in the past, even OBGYN doctors in the US were all male, and women themselves found it unacceptable to have a female OBGYN doctor. Now in the US, more than 60% of physicians under the age of 35 are female. The last example is the bias towards female leaders. Till today, we still internalize the notion that men are better leaders and women are not suited for leadership positions, especially for national leadership. But look at the national leaders who did a good job in keeping this COVID crisis under control. So far, in general, countries with female leaders have all done well, perhaps because they don't think they know better than the scientists. Here are two very successful female leaders, Madeleine Albright, the first female Secretary of State in the US history, and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. Madeleine Albright once told a joke when her family proudly mentioned that she was Secretary of State. Her 6-year-old granddaughter disagreed. Isn't Secretary of State a girl's job? What's the big deal? Indeed, in the years after her birth, the US Secretary of State were all women, Rice and Clinton. And German Chancellor Angela Merkel has been such a successful national leader that many German people started to wonder, is a man really qualified for this position? For those children who only saw female chancellors growing up, they felt that it was natural for women to be leaders. Hasn't it always been this way? Why not respect tradition, right? As you can see, prejudice is easy to form. And let's think, if Trump was a woman, would there be any chance that he got elected as the president of the United States? Claire Luce, the first American woman appointed to a major ambassadorial post abroad, once said, "Because I am a woman, I must make unusual efforts to succeed. If I fail, no one will say she doesn't have what it takes. They will say women don't have what it takes." Next, I'd like to briefly review the theories explaining workplace gender discriminations, including feminist organizational studies, labor market discrimination theories in the economics literature, and the sociological concepts, motherhood penalty and intensive mothering. Feminist organizational researchers pointed out that workplace is gendered. Most of us work in organizations that are almost always dominated by men. The left picture is a White House meeting, and the right is a Chinese government official meeting with business owners. It's clear that both settings are male-dominated. So is it any wonder that the US still doesn't have one single day of paid parental leave at the federal level, and that Chinese women are treated the way as I showed you earlier? The problem is we all internalize this bias, and we think it's natural and there's no problem for organizations to be male-dominated. Justice Ginsburg once said that, when I'm sometimes asked, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And I say, when there are 9. People are shocked, but there had been 9 men throughout the history, and nobody has ever raised a question about that. The gendered workplace manifests itself in many ways. For example, power, resources, and status are distributed along the gender line. Usually, opportunities only open to women when there are no men to consider. For example, during the World War II, 5 million women entered the workforce. If you feel surprised to see these pictures, I wonder why this part of this history is not mentioned anymore by the mainstream. And then after men were back from the war and they needed the jobs, a campaign was created to urge women to go back home. These pictures are from the advertisement and government propaganda back then. The other issue is the notion that work is supposed to be separated from life and should always be prioritized. The current spatial and temporal arrangement of work is based on a male-centered assumption that workers don't have family obligations. Therefore, until men equally share housework and childcare, they're always going to be the ideal workers, while women are always going to be the undesirable workers. Have you ever thought about why we're expected to be in the workplace for 8 hours, even though the job doesn't have to be done on site and during these 8 hours? Why aren't there employer-provided daycare centers? I believe if it is men who are responsible for childcare, employer-provided or public daycare centers are already everywhere. There are other ways that the gendered workforce manifests itself. For the sake of the time, I won't go into the details, but only want to highlight one point here. Women's bodies are sexualized in the workplace, which causes extra burden on women, and it's related to the issue of sexual harassment. Oftentimes, women are expected to wear high heels at work. I urge the male audience to imagine how it would feel like to wear makeups plus a tight dress plus high heels for 8 hours every day. By the way, I have no idea how this woman could run with high heels because usually you barely can stand stably on heels. American lexicographer Erin McKean once said, "You don't owe prettiness to anyone, not to your boyfriend, spouse, or partner, not to your co-workers, especially not to random men on the street. You don't owe it to your mother. You don't owe it to your children. You don't owe it to civilization in general. Prettiness is not a rent you pay for occupying a space marked female. Unfortunately, it is still a rent that women have to pay to be women in a society, especially in the workplace." The economics theory literature also provided explanations on how women are discriminated against in the labor market. The taste-based discrimination theory states that men are preferred in the workplace simply because they're men, regardless of their productivity. And statistical discrimination theory says that people discriminate against women because they assume that women are less productive as a group, and they're going to be less committed to work once have children. And all these discriminatory treatments have a feedback effect. They make individual families choose to have women to be caregivers, which in turn perpetuates gender discrimination in the workplace. In addition, sociologists have theorized and documented the motherhood penalty. It means that in the workplace, working mothers encounter systematic disadvantages in pay, perceived competence, and benefits relative to women who don't have children. Back to China, overt discrimination based on motherhood status is prevalent. During job interviews, employers usually explicitly ask female job seekers about their marital status, pregnancy status, number of children, and their plan about when to have children. And employers often decide not to hire a woman based on these conditions without any legal consequences. For those who are currently employed and then become pregnant, they often got fired or sidelined by the employer. The last issue is the trend of intensive parenting among middle-class families, and now also is adopted by lower-class families. Raising a child these days is a totally different thing compared to how our parents raised us. Now, a middle-class working mother spent more time on parenting than a full-time mom 40 years ago. And imagine how this is going to impact mothers' careers, given that parenting is still considered a woman's job and that childcare infrastructure is lacking. According to a survey in China, for children aged 0 to 6, only about 20% are cared in daycares or preschools. And please note that public and private preschools usually are not available to children under 3 years old in China. The direct consequence is that an increasing number of women are leaving the labor force. Compared to 20 years ago, now the employment rate of Chinese women are down by 20%. So how are we going to address this issue? Unfortunately, it is very tricky because gender discrimination in China is not only structural, but most importantly, political. There's a state-led patriarchy in the Chinese society. China's President Xi Jinping explicitly and repeatedly promotes the traditional values around gender and urges women to be good wives, mothers, and caregivers. Xi's China dream equals to a patriarchal dream. The state intentionally tries to keep women in the marital institution, no matter how unhappy and even dangerous they are in a marriage. The legal system rarely addresses domestic violence issues, and this new divorce cooling off period requirement made it even harder for people to divorce. Considering that over 70% of divorce cases were filed by women, so this new law is making it harder for women to divorce. In this case, reported by the New York Times, a woman was abused by her husband, who threatened to kill her. Out of fear and trauma, she jumped out of a window on the second floor and was severely injured. However, even after this incident, the court still declined her divorce petition, citing that because her husband did not want to divorce. The other manifestation of the state-led patriarchy is the universal two-child policy started in 2015. Since then, the Chinese government has been using propaganda to promote the idea that a family should be consisted of a heterosexual couple and 2 children. This kind of propaganda is posted everywhere, from residential communities to schools, train stations, and airports. By the way, this was before when the propaganda was trying to promote the idea that a family should only have 1 child. In addition to promoting the idea that 1-child family is happier and is the right thing to do, the state also used threats and as well as violent measures to force pregnant women to abort. If you can read in Chinese, this sharp contrast of the propaganda during the 2 eras shows how people's lives and notions are manipulated by state power. Lastly, the state-led patriarchy has been aggressively suppressing human rights advocacy. In 2015, right before the International Women's Day, the Chinese government arrested 5 feminist activists for their planned anti-sexual harassment demonstration. What's most worrisome is that the state-led patriarchy is not only promoted domestically. The Chinese government is now so powerful that it also censors Hollywood movies. In Mulan 2020 movie, Mulan's place and duty was to defend the emperor. After she saved the dynasty, her next mission was to devote to her family. Shame on Hollywood. The movie repeatedly emphasized 4 core values: loyal, meaning serving one's parents, being loyal to one's duty, and serving the country, brave, meaning that we should do whatever the country asks us to do. True, meaning a woman should act like a woman. And devotion to family, which means filial piety. In this movie, Mulan became a role model for women in the Xi Jinping era. So far you have seen enough darkness of the reality. Then the question is, what are we going to do to make it right? Here I'd like to briefly highlight some important matters to address the issue. For example, have equal employment rights law and enforce it. And employers should abide by the anti-discrimination laws and also voluntarily take the responsibility to create a gender-inclusive work environment. In China, paid parental leave should also be provided to men, even though there is a possibility that men still don't do childcare and the leave becomes an extra vacation for men. Public and affordable childcare facilities are extremely important. For example, parents in Denmark get 52 weeks of paid parental leave, and then all families are offered public childcare starting at age 1. Lastly, in China, without social movement and advocacy work, and without the freedom of speech, it is unlikely going to be a change in either the policy or the culture. In memory of Justice Ginsburg, I'd like to show you a gender discrimination case presented in the documentary RBG. Let me stop sharing this PowerPoint and oh, sorry, I need to click share computer sound.
Must prevail.
VMI was a 150-year-old all-male military college. It had a tremendous endowment, well-connected alumni, 4-star generals. When you came out of VMI, that was something.
The Virginia Military Institute was the last all-male state-supported school in the country. In 157 years of school tradition as an all-male military academy.
Boys can be troublesome, full of hormones and so forth. I don't mean to make general gender characteristics or generalizations here, but for some young men at that time of their life, they need discipline. They need hard work, and they need not a lot of extra time to get into trouble, and VMI provided that.
Look at the men which stand before you! They represent the essence of VMI!
A female high school student wanted to attend VMI, so she brought a case against Virginia claiming that the all-male admissions policy violated equal protection. It actually went from the district court to the appellate court before it came up to the Supreme Court. This was an extremely important case for Justice Ginsburg. It was her first women's rights case on the Supreme Court.
The Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States.
I was very much aware of Justice Ginsburg's history with respect to gender, excluding women from an institution. I was very much aware of that. And I was trying to fashion an argument that would penetrate that.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court, educators are virtually united that many young men and young women significantly benefit from a single-sex education.
The curiosity is that you're defending single-sex education when Virginia abandoned single-sex education in all schools but one.
There were a number of women's-only schools in Virginia that chose themselves to go to coeducation because of the demands that occurred.
Demands from whom?
The trends that were away from single-sex education.
I was dealing with a very worthy and formidable force at the other side of that bench.
To clarify, you are defending VMI for all males and no public program for women.
The effort is by Virginia is to promote diversity by creating opportunities for people of both sexes.
That was my pitch. As you know, it didn't work.
The opinion of the court in Virginia against the United States will be announced by Justice Ginsburg.
Some women can meet the physical standards VMI imposes on men, are capable of all the activities required of VMI cadets, and would want to attend VMI if they had the chance. This opinion does mark as presumptively invalid a law that denies to women equal opportunity
to aspire, achieve, participate in, and contribute to society based on what they can do.
The for-men-only tradition of VMI became history with the arrival of women entering as first-year cadets.
Cadre, take charge of your arrests!
I was in the first class of women. We were here not to break tradition, not to ruin history, but to help grow it. For those 4 years, I worked extremely hard to be the best person that I could be and to represent women as a whole. I wanted to be that person that stood in front of the men and said, I can do it too.
It is most appropriate that we welcome today a member of our nation's highest court and notable example of a citizen with a lifelong dedication to public service, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Welcome to the Virginia Military Institute.
VMI fought very hard to keep women out. I had an alumni walk up to me and he says, I'm not going to shake your hand. I want to know why you're here and why you decided to ruin my school.
I know that there were some people who did not react well to the change, and my response to this was, wait and see. You will be proud of the women who become graduates of VMI.
It wasn't just about VMI. It was about the notion that you cannot exclude women just because they're women. You cannot say categorically, they can't handle this. It's way beyond VMI, way beyond. And she pulled some of the justices of that court over to see that you start with an assumption that you have got to treat both genders equally.
That majority opinion was the culmination of Ruth's dedication to the concept of equality for women.
We mourn the passing of Justice Ginsburg, tireless advocate for gender equality. I want to point out that we wouldn't have the opportunities and the level of freedom that we have today without the work and sacrifices of feminist advocates of the earlier generations. And many people think that, gender discrimination, especially in this country, in the US, they think it's in the past, now we're equal, all that. But as you can see, it's ongoing, and it's still ongoing. We are so far from equality. To end this talk, I'd like to share a poem written by an early Chinese feminist, Qiu Jin, who chose to sacrifice her life in fight for freedom and democracy. So in the Song of Women's Right poem, Qiu Jin wrote that we all love freedom. I'll let you read the poem in 1 minute, but read by yourself. Children inspired us to root out all enslaving ways of thinking and be capable of women of knowledge and learning. She urged us to shoulder our responsibility and obligations to fight for a better future. She wrote this poem in 1905. Over 100 years later, we're still here, far from an equal society. Therefore, I invite everyone in the audience, women, men, and gender non-binary people, everyone, to join the fight for women's rights and gender equality. We shall persist. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your comments and questions.
That is excellent. Thank you very much. I learned so much. I've listened to and digested some of the information you shared before, but this is such a wonderful overview from the problem to solutions and to the future. Thank you very much. There has been a lot of chat entries. So some of the points are directly from what you shared. So I will highlight a few questions to you and to our wonderful audience. Please continue to enter your questions either in the Q&A box or the chat box. A lot of virtual applause for your talk.